And welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to do a continuation on how to use the Witty library when talking about our positioning schemes. So far, we've been talking about static and relative positioning schemes and how to use it with the Witty library. In our case, we've been using the Witty text widget. What I've done is I've kept the same project from the previous video, positioning 2. I've added an additional variable, an additional Witty text widget called box 3, and I've set the border color to green. Let me see if I can close our left pane. As you can see, I've set the decoration style, set the border to thick and green and solid. And if you don't know what this syntax means, I would suggest looking at the 2 previous videos. I've also set the positioning scheme to relative, so we have now we have 2 relative widgets, or divs you could say, on our page. And I've set the coordinates by calling set margin. We've moved it 50 pixels over to the left and minus 30 pixels from the top. So this time we're moving up instead of moving down. Now I don't have the server up and running, but I do have an example of how this looks on the page. And if we look at this, I've made one change to box 2. Now if you know anything about relative positioning, and this is not to be a long tutorial on the differences between static and relative and how and why you would use it, but basically relative positioning is like static positioning. It follows the flow of the page. You would have one widget or div one after the other, and when you start fooling around with the positioning, in our case setting the margins, box 3, because it comes after box 1 and box 2, it would automatically have a higher Z index, which means it would be on top of box 2. So if we moved box 3 where it would be on, be in the same area as box 2 when we position on the page, box 3 would automatically be on top of box 2. But that can be overridden using a method called SetAttributeValue. And let me see if I can pull that up. That's part of the Witty library. If you look at this, it comes from Witty widget, which, if you look at this, let's click on this, comes from Witty widget, and then its child class is the Witty wet widget, and of course its child class is, or one of them is, the Witty text widget. So in our case, if you have let's just look at the documentation. This is only useful for HTML features that are not supported directly in Witty, and to give you some warnings about browsers and inconsistent support for certain HTML features. I made a comment about the Witty CSS decoration style, how it allows you to use CSS in your using your widgets, but it's not a full-blown. It's not a full-blown feature set of how you would use CSS. Well, if you look at this method, you can actually use CSS features or any other HTML features that are not supported directly using the Witty library. They haven't implemented it yet. You can actually take this and say, okay, I want to take the style of an HTML element, and then I want to set the actual value. And that's exactly what I have done here. So you see you have name and value. So if you look at this, I just called the SetAttributeValue, and I've called style, which that's part of an HTML tag. It's an attribute. And then I actually set the value, and in our case Z index, which would be 10. So guess what? Because I've set the Z index in plain sight, this used to have a higher Z index because they're both relative, and it comes after box 2. It was created after box 2. But now box 2 has a higher Z index because I set it deliberately, and I didn't set it here. So now, because I've set the Z index to a higher Z index, you could use 10, 50, 100, 1,000, whatever number you feel comfortable with, whatever scheme you feel comfortable with. Now it's going to have a higher Z index than box 3. So let's do this, for example. Let's go ahead and I'm going to comment this out. Going to put a comment here. Going to compile this. And you'll see from the example what I'm talking about. Let's just give it a second to compile. And I think, let's see, this is actually running. Actually, this was running. That's why it gave me a 0. If the server still runs, it's going to give you, okay, there's no executable to be moved. Okay, now it's been done. Run the server. So we can bring up Google Chrome. If I do a refresh, if you look real closely here, box 1, of course, is static, so it's automatically, the Z index is not going to be higher than any of the other 2 boxes. Then you have box 2, which is relative. Then you have box 3, which is relative, and the positioning schemes are, of course, the same, and the margins are almost the same. One is higher than the other. Box 2 is a little bit higher than box 3, but notice I made box 3 its top margin minus 20, so that's why it's going upwards like this. But look at box 3. It's on top of box 2. Just look at the color. See how the green border goes all the way around it? It's actually on top of box 2. Now, if we close the server, go back here to Komodo Edit, we get rid of our comment. We've called the SetAttributeValue, we've called the style attribute. We've set the actual value of it to a Z index of 10. We've saved it. We compile it again. Okay. Then we run it. And if I do a refresh, notice now, very carefully, box 2 now is on top of. Maybe I should have used solid colors, but notice how now box 2 is on top of box 3 because now it has a higher Z index. So I just wanted to show you that when you have relative positioned widgets or divs, if you want to go ahead and if you set attribute value using our style attribute and set the extra value to a Z index of 10, and you can use any CSS value you want to use, borders, margins, text alignments, but in our case we did Z index. If you just set this automatically, it'll automatically be on top of or below, if you wanted to do it below, any div that has a relative position. So basically that is how you can override the Z index in your Witty widget project. I'll see you in the next tutorial, and basically what I'm going to talk about there is how we can use absolute positioning inside of a relative div. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.